The culture of the 1950s enforced very strict gender roles and had a very idealistic vision of what a family should be. During World War II, many women joined the workforce because the men were in the war, and many women grew to like working and having a career of their own. However, when the war ended and men returned home to their normal jobs, the women were thrusted back into a housewife role despite the reluctance of some. In addition to the return of what was then normality, the so-called Lavender Scare, the persecution of homosexuals in the 1950s by the US and the UK, created paranoia and social anxiety among people who feared being persecuted. This led to hypermasculinity and femininity in order to seem ordinary, which reinforced the traditional gender roles. These gender roles were the basis for creating the family that everyone saw on TV. Sitcoms depicting the perfect nuclear family illustrated an ideal that could not be achieved. The idea of a nuclear family, which consists of a father, mother, and their children, was prevalent at the time. The father was expected to be the breadwinner and the dominant spouse, while the mother was the homemaker and responsible for raising the children. The ideal for children was to be obedient and well-behaved, and the values imposed on them very much reflected their parents' childhood experiences. The children of the 50s were raised to believe that acquiring material possessions and a stable job was the path to happiness, which came from their parents' Great Depression-era childhoods. At this time, to be an American, it meant to strive for these familial values and roles.
In the early 1900s, being an American meant having access to the American dream. Whether you were a person living on the opposite end of the world, a kid growing up wanting a better life, or a lower-class worker, or a man trying to provide for his family, America was known as the place to be. It was a beacon of hope. The American dream is the idea that everyone has the opportunity to succeed if they are determined and work hard. The Declaration of Independence even states every American has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But being an American in the 1800s and early 1900s didn't have to mean born in the U.S. In fact, the U.S. is a country founded by immigrants. It is a country made up of people from places all over the world. In 1820, only 8,385 people immigrated to the U.S., but by 1905, that number was up to 1,026,499 immigrants per year. These numbers fell during the Great Depression, but the fallout of this sad time eventually reinforced the idea of the American dream even more. With men coming back from World War II, a baby boom resulted and demand for products increased. This led to job opportunities that attracted people from all over the world. Ever since, the amount of new people wanting to become Americans has been on the rise.
Post-World War II America had changed for the better. The GI Bill of Rights, also known as the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, gave veterans a range of perks. These perks varied from funding to allow veterans to attend college, purchasing homes and farms, to job training and hiring privileges. Post-war privileges provided to many white Americans. A result of this was several groups looking for full freedom and civil rights, such as African Americans and American women. After the war, living in the suburbs also became very popular.
The 1950s politically were largely defined by an extremely irrational fear of communism. Every day there were investigations of government employees, actors, and even organizations in an attempt to find people who supported the communist ideal. Any who were found were immediately blacklisted and subjected to public shaming, leaving them unable to socialize with the community around them, and in some cases even leave them unable to find a job. As a result of the harsh punishment of even being sympathetic towards communism, many chose to show clear hatred for the very ideal in order to remove all suspicion. It becomes very clear that the definition of what it was to become American became largely characterized by the belief to not only hate communism, but to publicly show their hatred. This form of how to become American was eventually given the name McCarthyism, named after George McCarthy, who was a very famous protester of communism, and was the one who started the idea of blacklisting those who were sympathetic towards communism. By the start of the 50s, it is predicted that fewer than 50,000 Americans out of the entire population of 150 million were communism, and none were publicly showing their ideas. This belief in what the American was politically remained very prevalent in the United States for many years, stretching all the way to what is estimated to be around 1991, the official time when the Cold War ended.
During the Civil Rights Movement, the definition of being an American changed from person to person, mainly by race. Some white people didn't believe black people were Americans simply because they were black. This was shown through the actions of segregation, racial bigotry, lack of equal rights, etc. To be an American, you needed to be an inborn white male. Quote, America was founded for and by the white man. To them, America was supposed to be a racially pure country. Because black people weren't considered Americans, they weren't given equal rights as as lack of right to vote that a white person would have received. As America was becoming more racially integrated, people realized that the definition of being an American had nothing to do with your ethnicity, but more about how you support America.
What is an American? An American means you're someone who is participating in a grand experiment in democracy, whether your ancestors came to the country fleeing some kind of religious or ethnic or economic oppression, or your heritage is that you're a Native American and you were here before Western Europeans. Being an American means that ideally that there is some opportunity and upward mobility for everyone, although this has become harder to do over the last many decades.
I think an American is, well, technically, an American is someone who lives within the physical boundaries of the United States. But in a more philosophical and cultural sense, I think an American is like defined by the culture of America, which consists of like keeping up with the Kardashians, like cheeseburgers and stuff. So
I guess you would have to be born in the country to actually be an American. You can be an American even if you celebrate your own culture.
Being American means being equal to my peers and having basic human rights.
To be an American is to be proud but responsible. We have a society and a culture that a lot of people around the world envy. They'd like to be a part of it. I think it's our responsibility to treat that envy the right way and be open, to not hold it over other people, to not flaunt it, and to be an American should be to appreciate what we have.
I think that I don't think there's a real definition of America because America is pretty fake nowadays. So, I mean, I don't know.
An American means to me, and it really has meant this pretty much my entire life, is it really goes back to the idea of the melting pot. My grandparents both came from Italy, and I grew up very much Italian, at least on one side, and on my other side, my grandparents came from the South, and they came from French and Irish and even Native American descent, and so I always knew of myself as a mix of a lot of different things. So when I look around today, most of my friends and to a certain extent family have similar stories to tell.
It means to be able to express myself without being judged.
For you to be an American, it means you probably have some kind of sense of entitlement. Because, I don't know, Americans have a knack for trying to dominate.
I think being an American 10 years from right now would be more open and more accepting to others due to recent changes in laws such as like the gay marriage law and civil rights movements that have been done in the past through America and are only subject to happen more in the future.
I'll have basic rights, and I feel like America will be more liberal during that time.
Yeah. I think with the recent surge of technology, social media, being able to share things with different, more remote places, it's going to become less of just an American idea and more of a global idea.
In 10 years, the shape of America, the demographics of America will be very different. More ethnic minorities will then be the majority.
I think that human rights will expand and the government will have less control of the people.
I think being an American will be much more different because our culture is still evolving, and as Americans, we are still changing since we are still considered a new country.
So this idea of American in 10 years, I'm a little bit skeptical that we can even be thinking about ourselves as Americans in 10 years. I think if all the countries of this planet aren't thinking about themselves collectively in relation to the environment in 10 years, we're going to have some serious problems.